Hello, and welcome to the 8th episode of the Travel Connect virtual series, exploring the future of travel with G Adventures. I'm your host, Peter Kane, and today I'm joined by Bruce Poon Tip, founder of G Adventures, the world's largest small group adventure company. Bruce, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate your time today. I'd just like to start out, for those that don't know you or don't know G Adventures, just kind of a little bit of background of what inspired you to start the company and what really makes it unique.
Wow, well, we're 31 years old this year. So we started way back in 1990 when travel was very different, before the internet, before many things. And we are a small group adventure company. We have operations in 100 countries, in over 100 countries, tours in over 100 countries. And we're truly now a global brand. We sell, people from 160 countries book trips with us every year. And I guess where we differentiated in the mid-90s when kind of ecotourism became kind of a buzzword, we kind of diverged from that slightly, and we're the first kind of company to look at how communities and community tourism developed, and we kind of pioneered that whole idea of social enterprise and community tourism, where we work with local communities. And when poverty intersects with tourism, we can create magic and create wealth distribution and poverty alleviation through tourism. So that's always great. Kind of been our goal. And I guess we've also evolved over time to make it like a bigger part of our kind of our operation. And now we have like over 100 community projects around the world that are tourism based and that intersect with our tours.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah.
As I did master's work in policy and around entrepreneurialism for growth. And so this is all music to my ears. I was reading your book, which we'll get to, and you referenced at one point freedom and happiness as, quote, two big cultural inflection points for G Adventures. Could you expand on that a little bit more and how they shape the organization?
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's a great question. I believe, human happiness drives the right behaviors for a business. And when you study the science of happiness, it's directly linked to, I think, to entrepreneurship and business and running a business, where it's about, there's what we call momentary happiness, which is triggered by people buying stuff or, family connection. But sustained happiness is, people that are connected to being part of something greater than themselves, or being connected with the people that they're with, creating a culture where people can be connected. And so if you study, for every, study of happiness, there's these pillars that drive human happiness. And when you build that within your business model and you create an environment where people can come to work and have the opportunity, just because you build that environment, it doesn't mean you're immediately happy. You build in an environment where people can achieve happiness by hiring the right people that really want it, and building a community. And freedom is one of the 4 pillars of happiness. Being able to, be yourself, be able to learn from your mistakes and not feel intimidated. Freedom is quite a big word. So as an entrepreneur, and as you kind of grow, especially how big we've gotten over the years, freedom becomes a very important part of being nimble as an operation. You want people that are committed to being nimble, and speed to market is everything in business. So those 2 things are pillars in our business model, and everything that we do, every program we put together, every training program is linked to one of the pillars of happiness or for driving freedom. So I promise our employees, as we get bigger and do better, instead of what most companies do, which is lock people down from their freedoms and create more rules and regulations for people to exist within the business framework, we promise to create more freedoms as we get bigger, to become more nimble as we get bigger, and just kind of reverse that thinking. But it's driven by the people. It's driven by our culture of people, and and I believe happy people drive performance. And we've shown that, especially over the last 15 years, how when people are driven by achieving their own personal happiness in an environment that's also part of their work, it drives, incredible performance. And we demand excellence, and we're not ashamed of that. And it's tough, it's hard work. There's a lot of tough decisions to be made in an environment of happiness. It's not all just everyone running around laughing and, and holding hands. But once you get the model right, it self-regulates and it drives the performance of the business.
That's great. It's really like a virtuous cycle as you kind of continue to build and grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. So it's been, well, we're pushing a year since I think the first cases started showing up, or at least being
Friday the 13th.
Diagnosed. Yes.
Friday, March the 13th. I'll never forget the day that I made the decision to cancel trips till the end of April and then close our office. So I remember the date very well.
Yeah, we, my wife and I were we had originally had a trip scheduled to Japan, and then we didn't really.
I might have seen you there. That was my first trip after the lockdown. I thought I was still going to get to go.
We were so excited, and then as things started progressing over, I think February, really, we were like, well, we probably maybe like make it a little bit closer to home. And so instead of making it like really close to home, we decided let's go to Ireland instead. And then it was, I think, that day where the lockdown started. Tom Hanks caught COVID. The NBA stopped playing, and we had to cancel our trip then to Ireland. And it's it'll never change. But what I think was interesting is you kind of took that opportunity to go and write what you've coined as an Instabook.
Yeah.
It's called Unlearn: The Year the Earth Stood Still. And it was something beyond those typical, statements that a lot of organizations said. We're here. We're thinking about you. We're all in this together.
See, that was exactly the motivation. Actually, people think it was some kind of I was divinely inspired to inspire people, but I was being pressured to put something out, like a statement, as a company statement. And like you, I was receiving an email from every single online thing you've ever purchased. Some T-shirt company telling you, we're going to get through this. We're going to be stronger on the other side of this. And so all these kind of talking points, corporate talking points were coming out.
Yeah, the unprecedented times.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we banned that use.
Yeah.
But you make a concerted point in the book that we, being humanity, we're born explorers, and that the quote fastest path to peace is through travel. That's something I fundamentally agree with, and I was hoping you could expand on that a little bit for the audience. Sure.
Well, there's two questions there. I mean, the first one, we always believe that we're born curious and we're born explorers, and society makes us tourists. Somewhere along the way, we're taught that amenities become more relevant to destination. The idea and the way travel is sold to us today is all about thread counts on sheets or Broadway shows or entertainment, like whether it's zip lining on board or 10 different restaurants to choose from. There's actually a cruise ship right now that promises a go-kart track, because you wouldn't want to leave your go-kart hobby going on vacation. And so I believe that somewhere along the line we are society and creates this image that suddenly amenities are more important than the destination itself, and we're no longer connected to destinations. And travel is the greatest equalizer. I mean, if you travel the right way, and get a chance to see some of the most pristine places in beautiful countries, but experience cultures and other people. I mean, I think that there's every opportunity to impact people's lives by traveling. But not only people on the ground, but also your own, if you go with an open heart and open mind, and don't expect to be served, and don't expect to have all your comforts of home while you're not home. And so I think that there'd just be less, violence in the world if people understood how other people lived, other religions, other cultures. I think it would take away a lot of ignorance, as well as, feed the soul for people when they get home. Like to give a better understanding of where you sit in the universe and who you're sharing this planet with, as opposed to, we all know that fear is, people are fearful when something is unknown. And that's exactly what happens with all this, all these kind of immigration bans and walls being brought up, and and separation. Like we just finished, 4 or 5 years of division,
Yeah.
and it's all driven by fear. And so I think travel, I have a very high, obviously, romantic view of travel, but travel can be that vehicle for people to travel and, come home with a greater sense of purpose.
Yeah.
If they actually travel with that greater sense of purpose, like be
Right.
connected to the destination, have a reason why you want to see a certain country. Like you're going to Japan. Why Japan? But there's something specific about Japan in that year, in that moment that you wanted to see. And hopefully you were connected to the destination and actually wanted to see it for what it really is and not create a Western bubble for you to enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very much a similar theory of the case to the work that Anthony Bourdain did.
Yeah.
Right, which is let's go explore, let's go learn, let's go meet, let's go realize that we're all the same. It's just we have our unique cultural differences and that's what makes everything special.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what makes humanity special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And one key takeaway I took from UNLEARN, you touched on this a little bit in your answer, is that we become an industry of tourism and consumption rather than exploration and contribution.
Yep.
And so for those listening, how can suppliers, travel agencies, others within the community sort of help to either look at, understand, or address those challenges, whether it's leakage, which you talked to, becoming more community-based or community-driven? Like, what can a travel agency do?
Well, I mean, the first thing they have to do is understand what that really means and define it on how, and because, unfortunately, when people want to define things, it's dangerous because because there's room for interpretation. So if you even look at the evolution of tourism the last 20 years, it started with ecotourism was the first time somebody said the tourism was impacting the planet, right? But then it evolved to responsible tourism, and then sustainable tourism, and ethical tourism, and green tourism. And and that's confusing for the consumer, first of all. And so the consumer comes to the travel professional, and they need to know how it's defined, because when something is confusing, the first thing people do is push it away. When the idea of ecotourism evolved to responsible tourism, and people started talking for the first time that your holiday impacted people's lives, not just the environment, and how cultures were impacted by these massive cruise ships with 6,000 people getting off into small ports and spending $100,000 in 6 hours. Kids are no longer going to school, right? And they're spending the rest of the week building crafts to sell, and their motivation, they're vulnerable to commercial activity. And so, I mean, all of these things are what really, is a travel professional has to understand to really be able to, you have that person in front of you. I mean, as an operator, I don't get the opportunity to have a traveler in front of me very often, but they actually are with them in the selling process. So there's a lot of power in that position. To also just note the differences, like even within the cruise industry. I mean, I always, I know that, Royal Caribbean has done so much more for so much longer. Some, other companies are starting to do stuff, but they should know that, that Hilton over Marriott, or Ritz-Carlton has done much more than Four Seasons. And so that they can actually be knowledgeable about it. And, and it's not, and, they're the ones who have to actually ask the questions and be knowledgeable to inform the customer. Because the actual movement is not to change the world through travel is not us, the operator. It's not you, the agent. It's the consumer. The consumer has to demand the products. Entrepreneurs fill demand. Like we fill demand when a customer asks it. The teacher, though, of that customer is the agent who's sitting in front of them when they just say, I don't know where I want to go. My neighbor went on a Disney cruise and I want to do something different. And that magic moment, like they should know the differences, and it's a big part of the future of travel. We've been doing this for 30 years, and we've been such a small niche part of the industry. We've been quite loud for our size, but we've always just told travel agents not every customer is suited for our kind of tours. It's actually a very small part. So we understand you have to sell other things. But when that one person comes and says, they want something different, or they want to go on a trek in Nepal, or they want to go to Mongolia, or they're open to going on a safari in Africa or whatever, remember us and also know the differences of all of the other products, instead of the capacity that we're forced to push in the industry and the commoditization of experience.
Yeah, there seems to be a real consumer educational opportunity just in the market in general, right? Where, to your point, my neighbor did this, and that sounds interesting, and that sounds like something maybe I even want to do, right? But in so many instances, even let's say a trip to Japan can, to your point, be very, very different depending on how you go about doing it. And it's educating people that there's an opportunity just again to step out of your bubble and experience something truly unique and local.
And there's different levels, right?
Different,
Exactly. I mean, there's you can go on a small ship cruise and sailing trip around the coast and see rural Japan, which is fascinating. Or you can go to Tokyo and just see, and there's all kinds of distractions and entertainment in Tokyo, which is great. Or you can take the train system is amazing. You can just get a backpack on and just train and go into the most tiny, small towns and see amazing people. Or you can do a combination of any of that. It's all available there, but the customer's intimidated when they go to a foreign country where they don't speak the language, and they need a travel professional to give them that confidence.
Yeah, exactly. And that really just underscores the value of the travel agencies, travel advisors, and the operators themselves.
100%. And there is no greater time in the history of our industry than right now that the travel industry it's proving its value to the customer.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and then I want to come back to two other things that I think are really interesting. But at the end of your Instabook, you reference how individuals have always used travel to reboot. And I think to your point just now, we're at an opportunity where we can almost do the same at a societal level.
Yeah.
And come out of this crisis in a way that it reboots our way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to just thoughts, comments, agreement, disagreement from you on any of that.
In terms of how travel impacts society?
On how we can leverage travel as a way of shifting our worldview coming out of this pandemic.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, travel has always worked in parallel with society. So people are asking questions. There's a tipping point on values and matching travel because people are changing how they live at home. Right. So I mean, for years, people would recycle at home and eat organic food and have a sustainable life and be focused on it, but suspend all those beliefs when they go on holiday because for some reason we think that if we go to another country, we don't have to live the same way. And I'd eventually, I've been saying this for years, that eventually there's going to be a tipping point where people say, well, this is kind of strange if I live like this at home, but how society changes and how it kind of moves with, and how travel kind of, impacts on outside of just following society, does it in so many different ways. It's about, when people decide they want to travel, it's a very powerful position that we have. There's very few people on the planet that can decide to travel, right? We're one of very few people on this entire planet. When we realize that, we realize the power and privilege that we have. And we're going to some of the 40 poorest countries in the world as well. And if done right, travel can be this great form of wealth distribution. And we're kind of conditioned to donate money to charities when we want to do good, but going on vacation could have just it's the noble purpose of tourism. We could have that impact, and just going on vacation can be our form of giving back. I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
no, I think that kind of addresses the way in which we can reboot, I guess is the way that I'm looking at it, right?
How we're going to reboot on the other end of this, or I think I strayed from your question there, is really, it's how what we're doing getting out of this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, after this 3 or 4 years of division and separation, the planet needs each other to get out of this pandemic. Like, we're forced to be together now.
Yeah.
We can't all vaccinate ourselves out of this and leave one country unvaccinated, because it'll just come back, right? So I think that makes the world seem really small, and I think people are going to travel differently on the other side. Yeah. They're going to be more purposeful, as I mentioned, more connected to destinations. There's talk about people traveling slower, like people staying longer and going more deeply into one country, as opposed to be motivated by seeing 10 countries in 7 days. And it won't be everybody. There's not going to be a massive kind of collapse of the mainstream travel, but it just takes a small group of people to change the way they look at travel. Yeah. On the other side of this, to change the entire landscape of the industry, which will educate a larger group of people, but still a small group. And and the next generation that's coming into travel now, which is the younger millennials, they're demanding completely different things. And this pandemic has opened their eyes to so many things. And just before the pandemic, remember, the buzzwords were over tourism, and the flight shaming of carbon emissions, and all of those things are kind of causing people to question. And on the other side of this, my hope is that it's just connected to one thing, which is people being more connected to why they need to travel. Yeah. And what we started this whole discussion about, that internal need to explore. We were born to explore. We were born to be curious and find out meaning in why we're on this rock together, and where is my place on Earth, in this universe. And more people are questioning that because of this, forced hibernation we're in right now. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. No, and I totally agree that it's only what's the quote? It only takes a small group of people to change the world.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing it. And I think I totally agree with you in that. I think that's going to be the path forward too. From only a small group of people are going to change the way we ultimately travel 20, 30 years from now.
And there has been a small group of people, and our industry has been kind of growing faster than the industry average for the last few years. But now there'll even be more. And what happens is those people, once they understand or change and create the demand, more businesses and brands, they'll create the product for that demand. And then they tell their friends, they grow up, they have kids, and that's where the audience grows. And that's where, what you referenced earlier as well. Then someone talks to their neighbor. They came back from another compound resort holiday that looked the same. The destination wasn't relevant because they never go outside the walls. But their neighbor comes back and said, I went on a G Adventures, and I did a train trip around India. It was pretty cool. and then I said, I wonder if I could do a train trip across India. I want to do something better. Instead, I'm going to take a 4-wheel Jeep trip across Tibet. Yeah. And suddenly, we're sitting there in the wing, click, 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 and you can do it, right? Yeah. And so that's how the change is made. Is the early adopters in everything influence the next generation, and then real change happens. I mean, it's those people that line up for 2 weeks to get the new iPhone. Those early adopters are the ones that kind of influence, what people do in the future.
Yeah, and here we all are after thinking all those people were crazy at the beginning.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, and then there's the laggards who have, who are still using the iPhone 4, trying to get the last and say, these new apps don't work on my phone because
it keeps restarting. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing the travel industry coming out of the pandemic in the next couple months and then the years that follow?
Well, I think our biggest challenge as an industry is getting people on flights again. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, we are all overeducated on germs and breath clouds. I saw this whole half an hour series on breath clouds that show, like, when we're walking, we're just kind of like Pigpen, and there's this breath cloud around all of us. And so we know too much. And so no matter what we do on the ground, I mean, I have my own challenges. I think that as an industry, we have short-term, mid-term, and long-term challenges to get people comfortable again and to travel. I think we've done a terrible job in general. I think some countries have done well, but in general, a lot of countries have done terrible. And it's funny that the countries with the greatest healthcare opportunities for people did the worst, like the UK, Canada, United States. Australia did amazing. New Zealand's done amazing. South Korea, Vietnam, like certain, yeah. But yeah, I think the challenges are going to be great. But no matter what I do on the ground, which we're doing all kinds of things for social distancing locally, and speaking with our operators and hotels, educating people about how we're going to get travelers back again. I don't know if you read that the Peruvian government ran its first Inca Trail this week with new protocols, and they chose us to run it, and we ran it with all. They chose us to take all the government officials to show the new protocols to show how it's safe. So we're all doing everything on the ground, but I think our biggest challenge is getting people back on planes feeling safe and comfortable. I mean, people will fly if they have to, and it's now kind of a hand-to-hand combat experience flying. I don't know if you've flown recently, but it's not like it was. Like there's the end of the innocence has happened when it comes to flying. And it'll just take us a while before, we'll get early adopters. Again, we'll jump on the first flights motivated by having less crowds when they travel. There'll be the next group of people that'll take it in consideration, maybe when rapid testing is available and they can be guaranteed everyone's. But there's a group of people that's going to take a long time to feel comfortable and on flying again, because that's a contained space, right? And so, we all had friends just before this pandemic that were borderline germaphobes. Well, this really triggers things in certain people, and there's mental health issues that we haven't really studied. They're going to impact a lot of people from being comfortable to travel again.
Yeah, and I know I was just listening to an interview with Katie Porter, who's a representative out of California in Congress, and that's one of,
the whiteboard,
yeah. And she was talking about this mental health crisis, and at the layers of it, from our first responders and frontline workers through just people who are going to need support in order to kind of get back into the regular swing of things as the pandemic subsides. And even anecdotally, I know friends who, at the beginning of the conversation, they say, all I want to do is get on an airplane and travel. And at the end, they're saying, but I'm also afraid. And so I know there's some research recently done by Harvard that actually dug into air travel and air circulation that has actually some really good outputs from it, some really informative outputs. So
there's a lot of myths about travel. Like the air circulation in a plane is better than you have at your house.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like there's been this urban myth for years that air in a plane is circulated because people often do catch something or get a cold or something on a plane, but that's not from circulated air. It's from for sure. It's from the surfaces.
Yeah, and now with the airlines, implementing that surface decontamination protocols as well, it's going to take if they ever go away, it's going to take a long time for them to go away. And I think that it'll be interesting to see how this progresses.
Yeah, I mean, the airline industry and any other industry, even like yourselves, have to be on that. I mean, I'm a big supporter of this, and I speak to as many associations and governments as I can, that we have to get people on flights again. Like everyone's worried about what to do in destination and handling surfaces and everything like that, but really, we need a campaign to debunk the myths about recycled air on flights, and really the air quality on flights is only getting better. Like I know that Air Canada is doing lots of things to actually change air circulation, is doing tests about air circulation in planes, and get people to know that the air and the circulation, you're actually safer on a plane than being in many kind of places that you would actually go to. And so that has to be focused, but each individual airline won't be able to do that. It'll have to take some overarching board that kind of takes on that messaging and creates that messages, because right now it seems like it's convenient, and so people don't trust all the information. but it's no different than the breath cloud documentaries
Right.
that are going on, and people are getting wound up about and educated about that. There has to be kind of another campaign specifically towards flying.
Yeah, exactly.
That educates people the same way.
Yeah, and we're hoping to actually have A for Aon on a future episode of this to talk to some of that research, and we've been trying to help them out with some of that campaigning for sure. You're talking about the Peru tours and bringing those government officials on it. One of the things I think is so unique about about G Adventures is that you use local employees.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's going to make it kind of easier for you all to adapt to those additional protocols going forward? I guess probably the answer is yes, but I'm curious to hear from you on that.
It is, but not in the way people think.
Okay.
We have higher standards, I guess, because protocols and international standards are being set, and we're now held to two standards because we're following so many local guidelines and local as well as international associations. So there's so many people that are creating guidelines and standards for us, and we have to kind of sift through all of that. But the local people, like when you go to Peru right now, they are desperate to get tourism started again, and the government is doing everything, but they're very aggressive in creating standards that are relevant to their destination.
Right.
And so when you deal with local people, they're driven by those standards, when the international standards sometimes conflict.
Right.
So every country is different. But yes, I mean, I think that, it's also harder for us to where we take people now that are very remote and that don't have the access to the daily information. When we're taking people to small communities, small villages, they don't actually even know anything about what we know just from our access daily, just reading the daily news about what COVID is, other than it's a pandemic. So we become an education arm for them, helping them, saying like, this is what we need, this is what has to be done. And we're sending people out into the field, into these small communities until we feel safe. We can't bring people to your community until you kind of embrace protocols. And you have to fumigate rooms between visitors when you have a homestay program. And when people come for in Peru for a weaving lesson or a surfing lesson in Costa Rica, you have to follow standards and protocol as well, and they don't have access to the information. So it's so much harder for us to deal with all these communities and small businesses because we become their information center, because they're just desperate to have travel.
Right.
People travel again, and when and it's easier for us to say, okay, well, this is what we need, or else we're not coming anymore. But it's really a partnership with us. And so we have to help them understand, why we're doing everything, so they do it right and not just show us. Right. Because they're desperate to get travelers back. Right. So especially in countries like, all of our safaris and everything in Africa, where, they've been late to the information stream of COVID because it didn't hit there as dramatically as other places as quickly. Their socialized medicine in terms of getting them vaccinating their way out of this disaster is weaker. So they're just confused. They're saying like, we'll do whatever you tell us, but we just want people to travel again. And so suddenly we become that, it's funny because when we're looking at operations and looking at the people that we need on the other side of the pandemic, there's all these kind of new kind of positions that never existed before when we're trying to restart with, now limited resources. How we're going to operate is going to be very different.
From a G Adventures perspective, what is sort of like your, near, mid, long-term sort of views around how things are going to come back?
Well, right now we're running trips. I don't know. We're really bucking the trend. We started running trips. We ran about 30 trips in September.
Wow.
On about 27 trips, I think, in October. But then Costa Rica opened for us in November, and our trip sold out in minutes. And we had, we carried about 40 groups in, November, December. And then we opened Tanzania and the Maldives, those two countries that opened. So we're opening as countries open, and we're taking over 50 trips a month now. We have people on the ground in Tanzania right now doing trips.
Wow.
And so, there is a midterm where we're gonna, socially distancing is critical, local protocols, and that goes to difference between even when you're going into restaurants,
Sure.
Buying entry tickets into museums or Machu Picchu or whatever is no longer free, like free in terms of time. They're all timed. And
Right.
so flexibility of our groups is compromised somewhat because you have to be somewhere for your window to enter, and you have to be out at a certain time. There's no longer kind of lazy operations where we can drop people at a museum and say, okay, well, spend the day there, and
Right.
because you can only not be there for an hour, so we have to entertain our groups for the other 12 hours that they're awake. Um, so there's just the change in that, but larger vehicles for less people.
Yeah.
Hand washing, masks. We're actually in most hotels, we're actually asking for rooms in the first 3 floors, so people don't have to use elevators. They can walk up to their rooms. Single rooms available for inexpensively because and readily available, because there used to be just a few available because we're a group tour and we promote the groups being together. But now, hotels have the capacity as well and so there's a lot of going. So midterm to that, we're hoping that, we have things in place, because now people have to have a COVID test result, positive test for the return home. So on the third last day before a trip, we're now arranging to help with that, to help people, get their test. So all of those kind of operational things it's very fluid.
Yeah.
And I think that then, when we start seeing the vaccination, the kind of the midterm and the long term, I think there'll always be an impact, but we'd like to get people into more remote areas again, smaller communities again that are now, fully educated, because the governments are helping us now with these communities to get them ready to bring tourists back in. And it can be a relatively normal experience. I mean, in the midterm, and then hopefully there'll be a point where we return to normal. I mean, my God, I'm outside of travel. Aren't you dying to see live music again? Oh my God, like a concert, or just being shoulder to shoulder, people watching a concert or a sporting event. And let's hope we are going to return to that at some point.
I totally agree. And even just watching TV now, if I'm watching something from even filmed 2018, 2019, and there are these crowds, and I'm like, why is nobody wearing a mask? What's going on?
I know.
I so want to get back to that kind of environment. I think everybody does. Just
hugging.
Normalcy.
Don't you hug people randomly? Oh my God.
Yes.
I'm a bit of a hugger, so I have to say these are the things that bug me. Like when I see someone that I adore, and I have to stand a distance from them for okay, hi, nice to see you in 6 months. Yeah. It's okay for now.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up? Just kind of give you the chance to.
Yeah. Since you've given me the chance, I want to go back to a point that I made earlier, but just kind of emphasize it. How travel is when you decide to go on holidays, what an important decision, and how much power and privilege you have in making that decision. I think people just don't quite grasp that, and the magnitude and the influence you have when you just simply decide you want to go on vacation. And I think that, within the travel industry, we have to bring people to that point where they understand how privileged they are to be able to go on vacation, and how few people on this planet have that luxury. Have the holiday time, have the freedom because of other commitments to be able to go away for periods of time, and the finances. There's very few people on this planet that can make that decision. And so we're extremely fortunate to be able to do that once or twice a year, or to even decide whether they want to go on vacations this year or not. And so, it's in our best interest as the travel industry to educate consumers and people that have that opportunity, to help them understand and to get them to grasp the magnitude of their decision, and the power and privilege you have when you simply decide you want to go on vacation, and how you and the decisions after that point is what's really going to drive not only change the world, but also transform our industry. How we as an industry can finally grasp our, we've been redefined over and over and over, and we've been pushed and pushed, And no industry has changed more than the travel industry in the last 20 years, except maybe publishing, I guess.
Yeah.
And travel agents are always kind of, complaining about, all the online retailers and all this stuff. But the opportunities have never been greater. We have never been proven to be more important as an industry, as a travel agent, than right now after a pandemic. And the importance of a travel professional. But at the same time, you have to get people to understand the magnitude of their decision to travel. And then as an industry, we can embrace what it is to be great as an industry, because we have the opportunity to be a transformative industry.
Yes.
And one of the most emotional things people buy is to travel. I mean, when you buy a car, it's emotional because it's something that you want. But travel is you're dreaming, and you're purchasing an opportunity to be better and to help people on the other side if done right. And that is how we can change our entire industry to be, flogging capacity and flogging amenities, and just embrace being a transformative industry that has the ability to create wealth distribution and alleviate poverty, because we're sending people on vacations on luxury holidays in the poorest countries. And if the local people don't benefit, it's not a sustainable model for us as travel. And the travel industry and travel agents have that ability to, be the voice and the face of that movement. That's very long, and thank you for giving me the time to stand on my soapbox there and give you that, but thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. No, this was fantastic, and your vision and the vision of G Adventures is something that I fully support, and that moves me, and so I can't wait to go start making my next trip planning.
All right,
So,
maybe I'll join you in Japan. We can go together.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Because I canceled my Japan trip too. So my first trip, when it starts, things get back, I've got Japan's calling me at the moment. I need to go.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Well, thank you again to everybody watching. As always, you can check out all of our previous episodes on arctravelconnect.com or the Airline Supporting Corporation YouTube channel. And we'll be back soon with the next episode. So thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.